everyone, welcome back to the channel. My name is Bryony and I'm one half of the Indecisive Readers. Today I'm here to do my second kind of chat about the Tits, and Feminist Bits book club pick. However, it's slightly different this month because I actually read like the pick in February, so I don't have a lot of current thoughts on it. And I have done like wrap-ups and reviews with it before, but everyone else wanted to read it, and so I was like, well, I'll go with it and read something else, because the theme was forgotten women, and it's a theme or topic I'm quite interested in because I feel like there are a lot of women in history that we've kind of failed to remember or have remembered in a certain way. So yeah, I read a couple of other books on this theme, but I do have some thoughts on the 5 as well that I will mention. So like I said, the main pick for the month was The 5 by Hallie Rubenhold. This is kind of an exploration of the 5 victims of Jack the Ripper, but kind of exploring them rather than exploring him. A lot of the stories we get of that genre are all about him discovering who he is, and this is a interesting exploration about the women, not behind it, but the women involved with it. So I really liked that it didn't focus on Jack the Ripper. He was kind of just like a throwaway comment. You explore their lives and then it's like, oh yeah, and they died. I mean, it's not that, because that sounds like really blasé, but it's kind of a, and there was this guy who has connected them all, and we're not going to mention him because we don't need to, he's not relevant to this story. So I thought that was really interesting. I loved that you learnt so much about the women, and it really challenged the kind of expectations of them I already had. I kind of expected them to be young and prostitutes and poor, but whilst I don't want to say that wasn't always the case, sometimes your expectations were challenged, and I thought that was really interesting. I thought I learned a lot about them, and I kind of wasn't expecting to learn so much. I also wasn't expecting it to be so easy to read, and when I say easy, I do mean easy in terms of like the writing style rather than the writing content, because obviously it is difficult topic to read about and difficult kind of subject matter, but I did find the reading experience quite easy, especially because it was like the first non-fiction book I'd read or like really wanted to read, and so I was relieved that it was quite so easy to get through. Another book in a similar vein that I read was The Radium Girls by Kate Moore. I borrowed this as a library book but have actually since like physically brought it. I just haven't gone and picked it up because basically it's on my shelf and I don't want to get it out, and also the 5 was downstairs. But anyway, I picked this up, and it's a exploration of this craze around radium. Basically, kind of in the wars, people just used radium in everything, so made everything glow, but ignored all the side effects, or noticed that there were side effects maybe for the men, but didn't kind of take any responsibility for the effect it had on the women, because these women were working with it day in day out, and they were like, it's not a problem, actually it's a good thing for you. And it was just, once again, it was a really horrific thing to read about. Like, it was so bad it almost felt like it was fiction, if that makes sense. I just, yeah, can't believe it happened, and my heart like genuinely broke for these women, and I was just, it felt so bad that it felt like fiction, because it was just like one bad thing after another, and you just kept waiting for like the good thing, because you know when you read a fiction book you're like, it's all going to go wrong but there will be a point where it gets better, and there wasn't really. I mean, there was obviously, because at some point these women got some compensation, at some point we got to tell their story, but they had to fight over the smallest details, and it was so hard, and I was like genuinely like close to tears at points. I was reading it at work, so I didn't like actually cry, but I feel like under different circumstances I may have done. And there were like some shocking bits, some like really graphic descriptions of details, so you do have to be like aware of that going into it, and also like cancer and stuff you have to be aware of. But it was such a hard book. I'm really glad that it was told, but it was a very hard book to read. Another book, again in a similar kind of vein, I mean they're all in a similar kind of vein, they're all about forgotten women in history. I read this in June, and this was Matilda, Empress, Queen, Warrior by Catherine Hanley. I picked this up not knowing anything about Matilda, I'll be honest. I didn't really know anything about her apart from she was the queen that no one remembers. But I don't know if I'm the only one who will sing this. But you know, in the Horrible Histories Ruthless Rulers song goes, how does it go? William, William, Henry, Stephen, Henry, Richard, John. So William, William, Henry, Stephen, and in between Henry and William, William, Henry, Stephen, Henry, Stephen. Between Stephen and Henry, there was Matilda. Now, Matilda was apparently officially named queen, or named the successor of her father, but never got round to ruling because she wasn't in the country when her father died, and therefore a man came along and took over. And I was just shocked and very frustrated for her. And I felt so bad that she spent her whole life fighting to get her rightful place on the throne, and she never kind of got it, and she only her lineage only came back to the throne because she ended up fighting for her son, and people were like, well, okay, that's fine because she's fighting for a man. And it was very frustrating. And I think in the end, like, she doesn't actually end up being his mother, the queen. It's that by some technicality it's kind of like, this is Henry, who is Stephen's successor. Stephen kind of takes him on as a like son, and it was very, very frustrating, and possibly not the worst thing about the book, but one of the most frustrating things about the book was that it was her story, but so much of it was told in the context of men, because there was just no written records of her. And yeah, so I was frustrated to read so much about men when I'm like, I just want to read about her, but we just like didn't have anything about her. There would be whole gaps of time where I like, don't know where Matilda was. But I did find it really interesting, and would definitely recommend if you want to learn some more about the women in the history. Speaking of women in the history, I also finished a book I have been reading since about March, and that is A History of the World with a Woman Put Back In by Kerstin, Lücker and Daenschel, I think. Now, this is, as the title says, a history of the world, but with women. And it is a comprehensive story history book, where it's like, here's what happened in Europe, here's what's happened in Asia, here's what happened in America, here's what happened in Africa, and it tells you about all these different continents at every point of time. And like, then it'll be like, here's the men, here's the men, here's the men, here's one woman, here's the men, here's the men. It goes on like that for the whole book, and so it's really, really good because it does cover everything. And so like, if you wanted to, I feel like it's the kind of book that you could like pick up and be like, I really want to learn some more about the Babylonians today, and are they real? And just kind of pick it up and be like, read a chapter on them. But because I've been reading it all at once, it's kind of been a bit, not long, well, yeah, long. It's just, again, not repetitive, but like, nothing can be covered in detail. It's just, here are all the men, here are all the men you've heard about before, here are some men you probably haven't heard about before, but here's the brief woman, and we'll come back to her later maybe, but you probably won't hear about her again. And so it was really, really good, but also frustrating and short and brief, and a lot of the kind of accounts where they introduce women was like, these women did these great things, we think, if only men hadn't destroyed the records, or we think these women did these things, but what we remember them is this person, because men didn't like the fact that they were in charge, so they created all these difficult stories about them being evil and things. But yeah, I thought it was very interesting, and perhaps the kind of one you want to read in parts, not in like various sit-ins, because when I was reading it in brief spurts, I really enjoyed it. But if I was reading it for a long time, I'd be like, I'm very tired and a little bit bored. But that's just me, because non-fiction. Now, the final one I'm going to talk about is Forgotten Women in a Different Way. So the rest of these have all been non-fiction, have been exploring women that haven't existed in a certain way. But this is Sappho, and it's her poetry collection, Come Closer. Now this is just one of those like really small Penguin classics, you know, where it's like that big and then it's barely a notebook, not even a notebook, it's like 50 pages. That is her like fragments of her writing that I read this month, and I'm less interested in her poetry than I am more interested in her herself, because whilst I am interested in her poetry, because obviously it is her poetry that we know her through, I'm not a poetry person, and so I'm just like, it's fine to read, but I don't really care for the poems. I would like to read like whole parts of her poems, but I would like to see whole parts of her poems kind of performed, because she was so celebrated in her time as a performance writer. It feels like we need to see them performed, but because we only have fragments, we can only read it, and it feels so wrong that we only get like fragments. Like, why don't we know more about her? And we know why we don't know more about her. It's because she's not a man. But yeah, I think it's such a shame that we don't know anything about her, that all her writing has been lost. But I think this poetry collection missed, because it was just like the poems and just fragments of the poems, I think it didn't quite work, at least for me, because I was just thinking the whole time, but what about what's not there? And so I think what I want to do, if I read some more about her, which I'm sure I will, I think I want to kind of read something that explores her like gaps, so explores the bits where the writing isn't. And I think there are a couple of collections that have done this, and I am definitely more interested in those, because I'm interested in people and historians kind of exploring why they're not there anymore, or what we think was there rather than what is there, if that makes sense. But yeah, they are some women from history I've learnt about. I would still like to learn some more. I've got some more books I'm sure I'll pick up at some point. I have more ones on my list that I could have read, but time constraints meant I couldn't. But yeah, I very much enjoyed it. I hope you very much enjoyed reading them if you joined in, or if you didn't join in, if there are maybe some in this list you would like to learn about. If you have read about any women from history you feel like I should learn more about, please let me know, because I am here to learn, let's be honest. But yeah, if you enjoyed this video, please consider giving it a thumbs up, subscribe if you're not already, comment down below to let me know you're here, and I will see you in the next video. Bye.